Hello, everyone. My name is Thomas Smith. I'm a member of the business development team at Net Capital. Let's give everyone a few moments here to get settled in. All right, get some people coming in. We'll give everyone just a few more moments here. All right, this is great. We got quite a few people coming in. I know we're coming in the masses here, but we'll give a few more moments and then we'll get started because we have a couple housekeeping items to go through. All right, well, this is great. Well, our other guests are coming in as we speak. I just want to welcome everyone, and without further ado, welcome NIKODY Keating. NIKODY, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here today. And how are you?
I'm doing great. It's great to be here. I've had a great experience so far in Net Capital, and I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
Absolutely. Well, we're excited to speak with you today. But before we get started, I just want to touch upon a couple housekeeping items. As all of our companies that we have and host the webinars, mytaptrack is actively fundraising right now on Net Capital. You can invest in the company by visiting netcapital.com and searching mytaptrack. And if you're interested in investing in this very exciting company, for those who are viewing this live, I will put the investment link in our chat. Next, I want to mention that like we do with all webinars, that this is as interactive as possible. NIKODY and I are going to start off with a couple questions and answer, going back and forth with some dialogue, and then we're going to open it up to some Q&A for folks that are attending. And if you have a question, I ask you that you please submit that in the Q&A and not the chat. It just helps us keep track of the questions as we're going along. And now, I know there are investors on here that have previously invested in your company, as well as some new investors or potential investors that have not invested yet. We will do our best to cover both sides of the aisle. And with that being said, NIKODY, why don't you come on in and tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my journey on mytaptrack started a little over 4 years ago. I and my wife were driving my son, who's my oldest, to his first day of kindergarten. And so we're driving him to his first day of kindergarten. My wife and I are nervous and excited. We drop him off, and within 4 hours, we get a call from the school wanting to set up a meeting. Within 2 weeks, we have that meeting where they're pushing us to move him out of his general education classroom into an isolated learning environment. And within 2 months, he spent the majority of his time in that isolated learning environment. But it really wasn't until we sat down for his first IEP meeting where I realized something fundamental was broken. Leading up to that meeting, the school had done assessments on my son. And in those assessments, they documented significant symptoms of absence seizures taking place inside the school that were never communicated to my wife or myself. And that's when I had my aha moment of, we're asking teachers to do way too much. We're asking them to be frontline medical triage teams for emerging medical issues. We're asking them to be social workers, psychologists, behavior analysts, et cetera. And like, this is a massive stack of things that we expect them to do. And on top of that, they get to do what they actually came to school to do, which is to teach. And so what I wanted to do is, my personal background is in technology. I was the architect for the user interface for the Coca-Cola Freestyle soda dispenser, the one that has the touchscreen with 120 different flavors of soda. I worked on that before it came out and had the chance to see that technology. Throughout my career, I've worked on a lot of technologies that people have seen and a lot of startups along the way. So things like Xbox, I worked on that before it came out. I worked on Mass.Bing.com before it came out. And startups which dealt with interfacing between people coming into board flights, interacting with the ticketing system through video conferencing. And so had a chance to do all of that. And so when I ran into this issue, I said, well, let me use my skill sets to impact this space. And so the idea is, let's simplify everything down to the teacher to a click of a button. And so we came out with this. And the idea is that when a behavior occurs, the teacher clicks it once for one behavior, twice for another, 3 times for another, and so forth. They can hold down the button saying note and take notes when the behaviors are happening, capturing better information that's real time. So as soon as they click the button or tell it the note, their job is done. It's already sent off to the cloud platform. They can even switch between students by holding down the button saying switch to. We extended this by making a smartphone app because not one size fits all situations. There are places where iPhones and tablets aren't allowed at all, and discrete tracking is more appropriate. There's times when you have 10 different kids that you're tracking and you're not going to be able to remember everything that you're supposed to be tracking, in which case a smartphone or a tablet becomes much more appropriate. Or maybe you're even online where a web browser tracker is much more appropriate. And so we have all of these different mechanisms to pull data in. And this information is pulled in real time, allows real-time notifications to other people inside the school, as well as outside the school. So think about this. You have a child that has a medical condition. By you actually tracking the information, our system is HIPAA compliant, so it can actually be shared out directly to the child's medical doctor, who could be alerted real time to medical situations happening inside the school. You could have it where you have individuals in your main office who can provide on-demand support to the classroom. Or an example that's actually happening in Texas is the special education teachers being alerted real time to behaviors happening in the classroom, in the general ed classroom, and is able to go down there, observe the behavior, and provide real-time professional development to the teacher who's dealing with these challenges. And so it's game-changing from a perspective of, we've just simplified what it is that teachers have to do, but we've increased the amount of communication, we've increased the amount of visibility into the challenges that ultimately the school is dealing with. And what happens when you don't deal with these challenges is the education of the child is more expensive. So the return on investment for dealing with these challenges actually is a dramatic reduction, allowing us to really take a look at, if we're charging for children being on our platform, is it really increasing the budget to the school? And the answer is it's starting to indicate right now, based off of early information, but the answer is no. We're actually decreasing the cost for an education of a child.
Nikody, appreciate you giving us the background and the general overall arching thesis of mytaptrack. Now, I know there's a lot of intricate workings to that, and we're going to dive in that. And I just, on a side note, so my girlfriend is a 5th grade teacher, and we were sitting down for dinner last night, and I was telling her about our discussion today, and she reviewed mytaptrack, and she thinks it's brilliant. So you have a fan in my girlfriend Rachel, but I just think with now and really looking at teachers that this is something that people should be looking at. So on a side note, just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you.
So when you think about your team, and I know you have a pretty robust team around you and folks that are extremely qualified in how you came together with mytaptrack. Can you talk a little bit about their backgrounds and what makes you and the team so unique in terms of what you're doing and what you've assembled together?
Yeah, so I come with the background I just told you about. I provide a lot of the technical and startup experience. My CFO is David Kirschbaum, and he has a MBA in finance. He deals with finance a lot. He actually is a expert court witness when they ask somebody to go through financial books. And so he understands the ins and outs of finance very, very well. Jenny Klein is basically our expert when it comes to kids. So she is a child psychologist. She's worked in research for Massachusetts curriculum, like Massachusetts state education. So she's been a researcher for that. She has the hands-on experience to understand what it looks like in the classroom, as well as what at a state level they're looking at from a reporting perspective. And then we brought on Erin more recently because one of the big missings that we had was somebody who really knew the ed tech space from a sales perspective. And so we brought on Erin Quiggle, who has over 20 years of experience selling ed tech products to schools and school districts. And so all of these different components allow us to have a diverse set of experiences and just the way that we think about the world. And we pull all that together to deliver a really great product. And we approach this, everybody on the team approaches this from we need to listen to what our customers are dealing with. Because state by state, even school district by school district, the challenges that they're dealing with change dramatically. And so we've built up this system so that it adapts to the school and it adapts to the child rather than the school and the child adapting to it. So rather than providing a curriculum and saying, this is how you need to handle students, what we've done is we've made our system flexible enough to adapt to any curriculum.
It's absolutely amazing. And to your point, and you know, I live with it and I see how fast and often these teachers have to pivot, right? So all I can say is Rachel is very excited about the opportunity with mytaptrack. Now, so we've covered a little bit about the general background and the overview of the company, but just so people can really understand, because there's so many problems, right, with everything that you're talking about and that you're addressing. But with mytaptrack, can you just dive in, you know, kind of in the totality, overarching theme, but covering, you know, what mytaptrack is solving in terms of the problem?
Yeah. So when you take a look at special education and even behavioral challenges inside of classrooms, the first step to all of these is data collection. And teachers right now, the vast majority, and this is our biggest competitor, is pen and paper tick marks on a sheet. And they're basically counting up the number of times behaviors happen. And they're taking notes. And they're stepping away from the child rather than engaging with the child to capture this information. And that takes a lot of effort and time. And so oftentimes it just doesn't get tracked. This information then gets handed off to board certified behavior analysts, school psychologists, special educators who are taking a look. And oftentimes this information basically gets to the point of anecdotal information. This child is having a problem. Well, that's great. How do I help you? And so you then have people having to visit the classroom and observe the classroom, and it's very disruptive. And it doesn't yield results. I mean, there are results that you eventually can get to, but a lot of times it just doesn't yield results. And so what you end up with is a child who's disengaged from their education and needs more and more support over time as they go through their full education life cycle. And then after school is complete, there's a portion of the student population that still needs support after school, like after high school. And so what they found is that the earlier that you can introduce an intervention that's effective and that gets the child past that challenge, the better off the child is and the less support they need. And so by simplifying what the teacher has to do in order to capture information that's better information, it gets timestamped. You can actually visualize the frequency. You can see durations instead of the teacher looking up at a clock and estimating. They're just clicking to start, clicking to stop. And you can see throughout the day where different behaviors are occurring. It gets sorted into the child's schedule so people can ask the right questions. Understand the difference between, is the child transitioning from one activity to another, Or is this the child just sitting in the classroom 30 minutes after class has started and bored out of their mind? All of those questions can now be asked because you have the data to back it up. You also have the data at the school level, because this is another challenge that they have, is how do you make decisions on where you're going to fund, where you're going to put your money in terms of curriculum, what's being effective in terms of helping kids out with these challenges, especially with people coming back from COVID, where you have a lot of social emotional issues. Having data, actual real-time data, where you can say, over the course of the last 3 months, these are the majority of issues that we're dealing with, and this is the frequency. And we introduce this curriculum, and this is the impact of it. Suddenly allows the schools to evaluate more effectively those soft aspects of education, which is peer collaboration, social emotional issues, behavioral issues, etc.
No, absolutely. And I appreciate you diving into that because, we've talked about the impetus, right? Why you thought of mytaptrack and why this company was founded. Then talked a bit about yourself and the team. Now the problem. But with every problem, there seems to be, a massive market opportunity. For mytaptrack, can you talk about, from an investment standpoint, the market opportunity for folks that, on this that might have invested or folks that are thinking about placing an investment in your company?
Yeah, so we did an initial market evaluation a couple of years ago, and we identified that there's 7 million kids, and that population is growing in the US in education, who could use support. There's another 5 million individuals post-education that still need ongoing support. Worldwide, these numbers double. And we estimate mytaptrack's primary market, which is special education only, is $3.4 billion. Secondary markets like general education, functional behavior assessments, and behavior interventions, we get a lot of interest from. Medical research and medical uses for this technology, we get a lot of interest from. ABA clinics, where they're working with kids with autism, we get a lot of interest from. And those are secondary markets from that 3.4 billion, which is our primary market.
There's obviously many ways and a massive opportunity for mytaptrack from an investor standpoint, right? Now it's putting aside the good and this revolutionary transformation that potentially could take place and that you and your team obviously believe with mytaptrack. But from a dollar standpoint, there's obviously a massive opportunity. And, when you think about your business model, Nikody, and for those who might not know, on this, just wanted to listen and really hear from the founder and thinking about, okay, what is the business model and how do you make money? Can you dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, so the business model is it's a solution as a service, kind of like a software as a service, except that you, as a school district, you purchase licenses for the kids in your school district, annual licenses. And that license comes with the tracking tools necessary, whether you need a device itself, whether you need the apps, whether you need desktop tracking, all of that comes with that subscription. And so you purchase those licenses. And that's the first model that we have. The second model is you're working with a lot of kids. And those kids you might not be tracking every day. You might have, kind of an A/B schedule, or you might have some kids come in one day and you're working with them, but then you're going to transition to these other kids. And we have a model for that as well, where it's instead of saying we're buying licenses for these kids for the entire year, we also have the ability to say we want to buy licenses to be able to track up to this many students per day. We don't care who the students are, just we want to be able to track up to this many. And so those two use cases cover the majority of the scenarios that we run into schools with. And we sell directly to school districts. We're open to our secondary markets, but we're not actively pursuing them just because we want to walk before we run, and we want to focus all of our attention on one market vertical rather than spreading ourselves out too thin.
Understood. And I appreciate you diving into that, because we had a couple folks, and we are going to get to the Q&A, and it's great that we have a couple questions that are coming in. I saw a couple folks raise their hands as well, but please just feel free to put your questions in the Q&A, and we will be sure to get to them. So, business model, understanding now how mytaptrack makes money. Can you talk about the progress that you've made, let's say, since the past year or two, right? And then most excitingly, some of the next major milestones where mytaptrack's going to the end of the year, and then maybe talk about a little into 2022.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started off mytaptrack really, bootstrapping everything back in 2018. And we knew that there's this massive challenge. We got some schools that we could do trials in, both a school district as well as an ABA clinic. We got back some initial feedback, not all of it good, because whenever you're doing an innovative product like this, you find out that the school's networks no longer allow your devices to be on it, and you have no control over the firmware because you went and purchased an off-the-shelf product. So we had to go through some of those interesting challenges. And we finally got to the point where we were working with an ABA clinic, and they were giving us a lot of great feedback. We got past that, and we redefined our portal so that it matched up much more with what the users, meaning special education teachers and behavior analysts, wanted to see at a glance. And that was some hard learning, and it was good learning. And then we planned to go live with our go-to-market in March of 2020. And during that time frame, we were dealing with some delays in our manufacturing of this device that we own every aspect of. We can rewrite the firmware, which we have to match schools' networks. But leading up to March 2020, we were dealing a little bit with that because COVID was affecting China. We were like, oh, wow, we ran into a COVID issue. Well, this will be a nice story, in the next year to say, hey, we actually ran into an issue that was caused by COVID. So we were at a conference in late February, and all the closures started. And we had planned, we had a slot down in South by Southwest. We had a school district in Texas who had invited us to come up and show them stuff. We were launching at a pretty good clip. We were going to get a lot of interest really fast, and then everything just shut down. And the first thing on school districts' minds was not, how do we do behavior tracking? The first things on their mind was, how do we even do education at all? And so everything slowed down. And the good news here is that it gave us more time to engage with school districts, special education departments that were trying to figure things out. And so we got contacts in Wisconsin, contacts in California, and started working with them and doing very much a listening campaign and how do we help? And leading up to this year, this next school year, we started really getting aggressive on, hey, we got to go to market. We got to produce revenue coming in, and we got to get this thing going to where it could be. And in that process, we just signed a multi-year agreement with the Huffman School District for mytaptrack in Texas. And we're talking to, 3 or 4 more school districts who are talking right now about, budgets and how to implement and what it's going to look like next year, which puts us in a pretty good point, because in schools, it starts off small and then grows throughout the school district. And we have school districts where it's not just the school and the school district, it's all the school districts around them are watching them. And so as we get successful, it's not just all right, we achieved our potential revenue for this school district. It's everybody else that they're in contact with, that they're talking to. We even got a special education teacher in one school district go up to her regional office and get them on board with mytaptrack. And so they're watching her too. And So there's just a lot of growth potential, and we're at the point where we're starting to bring in revenue. Our goal for this year is to onboard 3 or 4 different school districts from around the country, which we're really well positioned to do. We could even exceed that. Going into 2022. So as we're growing, budgets for school districts get set sometime between December for some school districts and April for others. And so our goal as we finish up this fiscal year, is to be in those talks with even more school districts. We have a little over $2 million in our sales pipeline of potential revenue. And so our goal is to keep expanding. And because our operating costs are very, very small, to get to the point where this thing is self-sustaining long-term, where the revenues are covering the costs.
Brilliant, Nikody. And before we go any further, I just want to put this in our chat. And as with all of our webinars, and for those who are in live, you can invest right now on netcapital.com in mytaptrack. And if you're interested to learn more, all information that is disclosed is on Nikody and his team's offering page. And we've gotten a couple questions here, and I'm going to jump around a little bit, but a couple of folks have said that they've invested in the company and have asked, what do you see as a potential exit, Nikody, for investors? Kind of looking into the future and where mytaptrack is going.
Well, so let's start off a little bit smaller. So we have companies that we are in contact with who actually contacted us, who are following us, who are interested in acquisition. So we already have these companies that are the big, we provide a platform of tools, who see mytaptrack as a benefit to that platform as we grow. But if we're growing at a really fast clip and we're getting to, 10% of our market total, there's no reason why we couldn't go to something like an IPO. And so I take it as, let's see where we can go. Yes, we have options. My job as CEO is to make sure that I have my investors' interests at heart, and I provide the most number of options that get us the most bang for our buck, if you will. But at the same time, we're not just in it for the money, right? Yes, we're going to make a profit, but we're also going to be changing kids' lives. So as we bring in revenue, we're looking at reinvesting some of that revenue to take us even further. We have ideas on what we could do with the device. We have ideas on what we could do for the market, for the special education industry as a whole, and going into those new markets and so forth. And so expanding our footprint even further. And so there's multiple directions we can go. And part of what I'm focused on is making sure that A, we're well positioned to get profitable. B, we're well positioned so that if we choose to get an earlier exit, we can get the best possible offer from one of these larger companies. And then C, hey, if we can turn this company, why not go for it?
Nikody, I really appreciate you diving into that and I knew I was going to enjoy speaking with you on this webinar and having as many folks as we do right now listen in. And this is also going to be recorded and we're going to be sending out to folks on the Net Capital side as well for you to distribute. But I mean, what better opportunity, right? When people think about making an investment, to have an opportunity to, potentially, obviously make money for a company but also change lives and doing so. And that's where, again, I can't stress enough, if you're interested in investing in mytaptrack, you can visit netcapital.com right now and view their offering page. And if you think it's a fit, you can invest right now via Net Capital. And Nikody, when you think about, between now and the end of the year, and then since the inception of the company a couple of years ago, what excites you the most? What gets you out of bed and really excites you and is the impetus on coming to the office every day and really driving mytaptrack?
Well, So my son is actually a really big motivational factor. Over the course of these 3 years, he's had tremendous growth. As of next school year, he's going into 4th grade. He's going to be spending the majority of his time in the general education classroom starting next year. So that is huge growth. But one of the things that always excites me is the fact that we get very passionate people like Tasha, who works at Huffman ISD, who's innovating in this space and getting results. And not just getting results from the teacher's happy to go along with it, it's gotten down below this pain threshold, but getting results in the terms of, she walked up to a teacher and said, "Hey, are you still tracking?" And the teacher's like, "Yeah. I've been clicking it every time I see the behavior." She's like, "I haven't seen it for a week." And it's getting to the point where these kids are now actually engaged in their own education. And they're, pushing the boundaries, like the teachers are pushing the boundaries of how much support they can get. And we have teachers who are now approaching Tasha and saying, "When do I get on this program?" Which is really exciting because it's not just about the kids, it's about teachers who, you probably don't know this, but general education teachers burn out in about 10 years. That's the average lifespan for a general education teacher. Special education teachers burn out in 2.75 years. And I don't know about you, but the first 2.75 years of my professional career, I had no clue what I was doing. And so we get these teachers who are just getting in and they're getting burned out so quickly because they have to do so much paperwork and they have to do so much tracking, and they're dealing with these challenges where it's really, really hard to see progress. It's still happening, but it's really hard to see it. And making it possible for them to be like, "Oh my gosh, I can focus on education and I can focus on changing outcomes," just extends that career and it makes it so they can focus on what they're passionate about too, which is helping kids. And that's really, really awesome.
Nikody, I can hear in your voice, the passion and the purpose behind this. And I often say businesses that are doing well by doing good are definitely worthy of folks looking at. And again, you can visit netcapital.com right now to visit mytaptrack. And, you've obviously, this isn't, with you and your team and your experience, not your first rodeo in terms of business and things like that. So when you look at the overall landscape of mytaptrack and look at your competitors and folks that might be, going down, no business is exactly similar, right? But going down some of the same paths. What really differentiates mytaptrack from the rest?
Well, so the first thing that differentiates is that most companies that are trying to do data tracking, they have a model that they have to fit a kid into. So they basically have an approach for dealing with the issues for kids. And so teachers will have to go and categorize the kid with different behaviors or behavioral categories. mytaptrack adapts to the child and to the student. The second thing is that we're patent pending on this. So our competitors aren't going to be able to do or have a utility that can be easily worn around a lanyard on the teacher's neck when most teachers are women. Women's pockets are about that deep and can't hold an iPhone. And so having something that's very convenient and can be handed off from one individual to another to continue data tracking without losing any information is very, very beneficial, to a degree that we actually get a lot of our initial customer meetings just because somebody is looking for something like this. And then the other part of it is we're focusing on getting the data secured and shareable at the highest levels. So we're actually at the HIPAA compliance level. Our automation is able to scale to millions of transactions per second. And so we're able to grow at a scale that other companies struggle at. And that has to do with a little bit of my background and what I've been able to build throughout my history. But it also talks a lot about the way that we've approached this problem, meaning we've approached it always from our customer's point of view. We're not just a product that goes in and we fit, and a customer has to fit into the way we do things. We go in there with an open mind and we get their ideas coming back at us. And so, you know, some of the features that we're coming out with this summer is a quick parent report where it's like smiley faces, straight faces, frowny faces, and we're able to use the data to generate those reports for the teacher, so they don't even have to sit down and like go through and write up these reports. They can just type in their notes, click print, send this information home with their kids, and just simplifying the amount of time that the teachers have to put in while listening to what the school district wants. So for example, with that report, the school district specifically didn't want an online report going to the parent. They didn't want the parent having to sign into something. They needed it printed. They needed it so it could be sent home. And so really listening to our customers and being that partner has allowed us to take advantage of this market where our smaller competitors aren't seen as a competitor to mytaptrack by the school districts that we deal with.
Nikody, this is exciting stuff. And, you know, when you talk about the functionality of it, I definitely hear you loud and clear. And that's for, you know, personal reasons, but also, you know, having not only my girlfriend, but family and education as well. And I just think it's so great what you and your team have built. And as we wrap up here, and first off, I just want to thank everyone for their participation and the great questions that you've given Nikody and mytaptrack and some of the things that we've been able to talk about today. But as we wrap up here, a couple last final thoughts for everyone that's listening now, and then folks that will be listening in the future about mytaptrack.
Yeah. So one of the things to realize about mytaptrack is we're focused with a pinpoint precision on figuring out how to make an impact to education from a student perspective, from a school perspective, from a district perspective. And we're working with some of the top innovative minds right now, at least it seems like that to me, in special education. These people are coming from medical industry, going into special education, and we get to work with them and figure out, you know what, as this tool comes into play, where can your imagination go? And they're going to some amazing places, from social justice initiatives where you have two people tracking, one being the teacher, one being a professional development coach, seeing the same behaviors, being able to like analyze that. We're seeing doctors who are talking about, what if we could do micro studies on specific medications and be able to, instead of just listening to the drug company, form our own opinion based off of data as to what this medication and its effects are on our patients for our areas. We're running into people who are saying, you know what, if I had this type of data, I could put together a proposal for a grant for studying how the effects of things like COVID have on the general student population. We have people who are looking at positive behavior intervention programs where it's school district wide, and being able to see and be able to show the benefit of these programs that just help kids out, and all of that just snowballs. So it's not one of these things where, yeah, we did good and we helped out a lot of kids. Doing good then turns into doing more good, because those people take it a step further, and then it goes into becoming more good and just snowballs up. Because the more people that we help, the more people who are there to help others.
Nikody, it was an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. I want to thank everyone that tuned in live with us to hear Nikody talk about mytaptrack and some of the exciting things that he and his team are working on, and most excitingly, where the company's going. And then those who will be listening in the future. Again, you can visit netcapital.com, search mytaptrack to make an investment if you so choose. Nikody, again, absolute pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you. And thank you for the great work that you and your team at mytaptrack are doing.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.